So welcome everyone. I'm Olivia Waterhouse, the Donor Relations Manager at the Peconic Land Trust. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us. This is a really fantastic group, and we are just so grateful that you've chosen to spend your Thursday with us. Um, Educational programs like this are just one aspect of our ongoing efforts to restore Sagg Pond. And it's all made possible because of you, the generous support of this community. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your passion, your advocacy, your financial support. Um, yeah, the world would be a better place with more people like you in it. Before I turn this over to our president, John Halsey, I have a few housekeeping items. And I apologize in advance. I'm 8 months pregnant and I get winded, even speaking for like 30 seconds. Housekeeping items. John is going to give a short overview of our project, and then we have two presenters with us who are going to speak. Please mute yourself during the presentation and send any questions to the chat. We're going to collate these and ask them of our presenters afterwards. So yeah, with that, I'll hand it over to John. Thanks,
All
guys.
right. Well, happy spring, everyone, and thanks for joining us. And as Liv has said, I want to thank everyone on this Zoom who have contributed to this Sag Pond Restoration Fund that the trust maintains. The trust is pleased and proud to be the coordinator of this effort to revitalize Sag Pond, and all this support goes to the work of the Center for Clean Water Technology, Chris's work, Cornell Cooperative Extension. I thought I saw Molly Graffam on here as well. The Clear, Ron Paulson isn't on here that I can see, but he's a partner in the effort to put in the permeable reactive barriers. Perfect Earth Project is working with us, and we're supporting them with your dollars to help with vegetative buffers along the shorelines and landscaping and land turf management, all these kinds of things that will really help improve the water quality by reducing the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus ultimately from getting into Sag Pond. So can't thank you enough for making this all possible. I want to just kick us off with just some basics. I mean, it actually costs us about 400 to 500,000 a year to do all the work that we're doing, including the installation of these PRBs, which is actually supported with public money. We use the money that we raise from the community to leverage to get public money to pay for some of the installation costs, which are the big dollars for PRBs and things like that. So, kicking off the effort this year, we have a matching grant from the Goldman Foundation, the Joyce and Irving Goldman Foundation. They are providing a 2-to-1 um, grant, so they're going to provide us with 75,000 if we can raise 150. And that's a goal that we hope to meet by certainly by June of this year. And that would really raise about half of what we need for the total year to cover all the costs that relate to providing the services to the members of the community. So again, thank you so much. You'll hear more about that grant. We'll be reaching out to everyone. I want to specifically call out Philippa Weissman, who's joined us, whose property has the first PRB on the pond. We're looking to do one across from on the west side of Sag Pond on land owned by the South Fork Land Foundation. So that's the next PRB that we're looking to install. And also Charles de Gunsberg, who has really been stepped up in a big way to help with the fundraising. He's made a significant 5-year commitment to this effort. And he's really the backbone of the fundraising efforts that we've done. Goldman Foundation has been there from the beginning as well. And another foundation is the Mikowski Trust, David Smith, who isn't with us tonight, but he's also been very generous through that fund. So without further ado, I want to introduce our guest tonight. And we have Chris Gobler, uh, who is renowned for his knowledge of the plight of coastal ponds, given his history, experience, and expertise. And we have Chris Varley, Tom Varley, with us, who is really leading the charge to improve septic systems around Sagg Pond, and is a resource here for all of our landowners in the watershed. So, Chris, I'm going to turn it over to you first.
Okay, great. How's that looking?
Looks good.
Okay, great. Well, good evening, everybody. Good to see everybody. Chris Gobler from Stony Brook University, and I'm going to give an update on what's going on in Sagg Pond and some of the work we did in 2024, while as well as reviewing some of our past research within the system. And just as a reminder, over the years, you've been looking at general water quality parameters within the pond, and then specifically trying to understand the role of nutrients in driving the growth of algae in the pond, and specifically understanding the sources of nitrogen in the pond as well. And then a final thing I'll talk about today is our ongoing work with oysters, which I think is also very exciting. Okay, I'm going to start very briefly, talk about one of the major threats to Sagg Pond, and that's blue-green algae. Blue-green algae are also known as cyanobacteria, and they're a threat because they make something known as cyanotoxins. You're looking at here one of the more common cyanobacteria, microcystis. Excuse me for a moment. And the toxin that makes microcystin, which is a significant human health threat. And you know it's a significant threat when it's making toxins that are strong enough to take down elephants. And that's what happened in Africa a few years back. I'm citing a couple of papers here where that happened, where the elephants had drank ponds that had been evaporating, filled with the blue-green algae and the toxins. So it's a serious threat to large mammals and also to small mammals, specifically dogs. And I'm citing here a study both by the CDC and by the EPA, just pointing out that through the decades, it's quite common to see dog poisonings due to these cyanobacteria. And now I'm going to roll into some data from 2024. And this is specifically the levels of blue-green algae in Sagg Pond. Through the season, you can see we were monitoring from May all the way into December. And what you see is actually not too uncommon. It's a general pattern we've seen over the years for Sagg Pond, and that is specifically as the water's warm and you transition from spring into summer, these levels of blue-green algae get high. I have here the line is approximately the DEC standard for blue-green algae, so you can see we're above that for several dates. I'm probably the only one in the room who knows what Aphanocopsa is, but that's the genus of blue-green algae we found, and it is known to make that toxin microcystin. And I'll note, you'll see sometimes the levels plummet and then they come back, and that's partly related to the opening of the cut. So the fact that it's getting opened more frequently is a good thing because it helps flush out the blue-green algae, and the blue-green algae actually, beyond being flushed out, can only thrive in sort of brackish / fresh water. And so that's the twofold way that the opening helps ameliorate these conditions. We also look at the total amount of algae in Sagg Pond, and again, these levels are pretty high. There's also a little bit of a seasonal trend here, but overall, it's not too far off from the blue-green algae. But we really want to, in a marine system, have levels closer to down here. We're way above that. It's just showing that we really need to do work to get conditions more in line with with national and state standards. On the blue-green algae front, I mentioned Aphanocapsa. That joins a list of about a half a dozen other blue-green algae that we've seen in Sagg Pond over the years. We have seen microcystin up to 1.5 micrograms per liter in the pond, and that's above the drinking water standard set by EPA. And I won't go into the details, but we've also seen that when we get these algae, we also see low oxygen conditions. I want to now transition to understanding what's driving these events. We've done experiments in the past looking at the relative role of nitrogen and phosphorus, using a few different approaches, but most commonly bottle incubation experiments where we grow the algae with and without nitrogen and phosphorus. And when we do that, this is the general sort of trend we get, whereby if we add nitrogen on its own or add it in conjunction with phosphorus, we see more rapid growth of the algae, suggesting that nitrogen is the driver of the algae in the pond. And that's not surprising. I've done research in the past that it's shown that it can drive both the growth of the algae, but actually also the toxicity of the algae, because that compound microcystin is a nitrogen-rich molecule. Other work we've done in the pond is to try to understand where is the nitrogen coming from. And as you can see, this is a very comprehensive study where we looked at sediments, wastewater, fertilizer, runoff, atmospheric deposition, tributaries, and even waterfowl there in the pond. We did a complete sediment survey of the entire system, going from the neck all the way down to the southern area. I'm just showing here organic matter, but in the same efforts, we've looked at the flux of nitrogen out of the sediments, depth of mud and sediment, to really quantify that nitrogen source. And we've also looked at concentrations of nitrogen in the groundwater in the watershed. These are measurements by Suffolk County that we've plotted out, and you can see some real hot spots, particularly to the northern end of the pond. When we do those nitrogen budgets, the take-home message is that it's kind of, as you can see, there's lots of different sources. The two biggest sources are on-site septic systems and then agricultural fertilizer. And those benthic fluxes are in there, but they're not as important as those two sources. And the study that we did showing that there's too much nitrogen, it's got to be reduced. It's fully consistent with Suffolk County's sub-watershed study. In that study, I have the excerpt from that study, and specifically the page on Sagg Pond, which essentially said, they call it ecological sensitivity rank 1. That means it should be the highest priority for reducing nitrogen loads. And they're recommending a 63% reduction in loading of nitrogen from land to sea. So if we go back to that here, I mean, that really means we've got to, take out all the cesspools, replace them, and deal with the agriculture and the other sources as well, if we really want to get on track to hit that 63% target. I'll very quickly go through this because I know Tom's going to talk about septics a lot, but I just want to highlight something that the Center for Clean Water Technology at Stony Brook does. Tom's going to tell you all about your current septic systems. Just want to highlight our nitrogen removing biofilters that we've created. And I want to do that because we just got some testing in, specifically for one of our two designs of what we call our nitrogen removing biofilters. And that testing essentially showed that it's achieved the lowest nitrogen effluent of any system ever recorded in Suffolk County, 5.6 milligrams per liter through what's known as the provisional testing phase. And we've gotten, therefore, to provisional approval. So we're really excited about this. And if you look, I mean, that's in some cases, the standard is 19. It looks like my slides have shifted a little bit here. But, this is threefold better than many of the systems out there that are already approved. So we think that this is a good opportunity for making a big difference. And I'm just showing here the design of that system. Maybe Tom will talk more about it. The details here aren't too important. Most important is how it removes a lot of nitrogen. And beyond nitrogen, we've also tested it for more than 24 different drugs, pharmaceuticals, personal care products, solvents that you find in wastewater. And the removal percentages that you find with these NRBs are really high. And in fact, in every case, as good as or better than a sewage treatment plant. Again, the system has just been approved. Tom will talk about it, but there's lots of grants available for installing these systems. Last thing I'm going to mention is our ongoing work with oysters. We've been working out this for a while. Of course, not everyone, some people love oysters on the half shell as a delicacy, but we're more focused from an ecological point of view and focused on the idea that, Mecox Bay, the neighboring estuary to Sagg Pond, has the most, and has always, not always, but for decades, has had the most productive oyster fishery on the south shore of Long Island. And it's partly because it has, just like Sagg Pond, this temporarily open and closed nature in the cut that's open and closed. And so the question is, can we get a similar oyster population in Sagg Pond? And again, this isn't towards the idea of having oysters in the half shell, but rather it's the idea that when you can bring back oysters, you can make a difference in water quality. Bivalves are sometimes called, like oysters are sometimes called ecosystem engineers. They filter the water. You can think of it almost as like a pool filter. What you're looking at here on the bottom are an experiment I ran years ago. This little green tub, here's the water line here. So they both have water, same amount, 300 liters. There's an insert tub in both of them. You can't even see the insert one on the right. You can see it on the left because at the bottom of this tub, there's about a dozen oysters that are able to just keep the algae filtered out and clear, which has benefits to the entire ecosystem as far as allowing seagrasses to grow and even building habitat. So in 2024, we were back on our oysters work. And what we did is we built on what we've done in the past. In the past, what we learned is that we're not going to be currently, as ecosystem conditions are presently, we can't get oysters to thrive in the northern part of Sagg Pond, but they do better in the south. And we've also tried different types of oysters, specifically growing them individually, but also growing them as something known as spat-on shell, which the spat is just the name for a juvenile small oyster. So what you're looking at here, for example, is a surf clam shell, and each of these dark spots is actually an oyster growing on that shell. Oysters at the larval stage are chemotaxic, and they specifically seek out and attach to anything made of calcium carbonate. They want to attach to other shells because that's a sign to them that some other bivalve has made it and done well in an ecosystem. And over time, they grow up and grow out like this. So you'll see clusters of the oysters. And that's how you get, if you've ever heard of an oyster reef, that's how you get an oyster reef. So we tried growing out spat-on shell in 2024. And we had an experiment whereby we had one of these cages and we grew oysters in the cage, but then actually on top of the cage with no protection whatsoever. And this was the idea that, sometimes in the past they grow well in the cage, but then in the ecosystem setting, they get all eaten up by crabs, for example, or other predators. But actually, the way this experiment went in 2024, it was the ones outside the cage that did best. And that's actually because of a little artifact of this experiment. I wasn't even going to show the inside of the cage because where the oysters were at the bottom of the cage, they sort of sunk down and they got suffocated. So it's not even a fair comparison. But what's exciting is that the outside of the cage, the outside oyster, that's actually what would happen in an ecosystem setting. So this isn't in a cage. This is with full-on predation. And these rates of survival, more than 50%. I don't know what that sounds like to you, if it's good or if it sounds good or bad to you, but I can tell you in an ecosystem setting with predation, that's excellent. And you can also see that between the time we put them out and we made our final measurement in December, they more than doubled in size. So this was very successful and encouraging. It's our actually best year ever. And again, we're kind of learning as we go. We learned not to put them in the north. We learned that the spat-on shell is going to do best. From this one, we learned that they do fine without the cages. They're going to do fine growing even in the presence of predators. And the important thing here that I'm going to talk about, or as I wrap up, because I am up to my conclusions, I just want to say, the conclusions here are, the water quality needs to be improved. We got to reduce the nitrogen and target those septic systems, and I'm sure Tom will talk about that. But that goes hand in hand with coming back to these oysters. the oysters just didn't do well and barely survived to the northern part of the pond. And again, it's just the water quality is not good enough. And this is something we've seen in other systems also. In some cases, you've got to improve the water quality for then the oysters to and bivalves to survive and thrive. And so in this particular case, the very far south where the water quality is best by the cut, the oysters look like they're doing well. And that's if we do that and we're addressing water quality issues, there could be the opportunity then to expand that oyster population. And then it could work in synergy with other things going on, like the PRBs and the upgrading of the septic systems. So I'll end it there, and I appreciate everybody's attention.
So I guess now we'll turn it over to Tom Varley.
Okay, there we go. Sorry, I was muted. Okay, let me get my slideshow going. Okay, so you heard from Chris. We have a nitrogen problem. We know that excessive nitrogen, he talked about, leads to low oxygen level, which promotes the development of the harmful algal blooms, the toxins that create, and the serious health issues that are associated with that. We also know one of the largest sources in the pond is from on-site septic systems. So how do we fix the problem? Well, we know upgrading to low nitrogen systems is the most important thing you can do, and it's critical if we're going to have any chance of improving the water quality. And waiting passively for homeowners to act means our local waters are going to continue receiving these nitrogen loadings for decades. So we need to accelerate the system upgrades. So that's why in January 2023, the center collaborated with the Peconic Land Trust. They hired me as a watershed manager, specifically to focus on Sagg Pond and Georgica Pond to accelerate the septic systems by working with homeowners individually about their properties and trying to get them to do the upgrades and answer any questions they have. Along with that is to make sure that the systems that we're putting in are the maximally protective of the pond. So we have to reduce the source of the nitrogen entering the water body. And conventional septic systems or cesspools, they don't remove nitrogen. And typical nitrogen system, conventional septic tanks receive greater than 80 parts per million they discharge into the receiving waters. The new nitrogen systems or the low nitrogen systems are less than 19, which is the county standard. So even seasonal homes used during the summer months only with a conventional septic tank discharges about the same as a year-long residence with a low nitrogen system. So we all have an impact. So a lot of homeowners say, well, it's just, I only use it in the summer or I only do it seasonally. So they don't think it's their problem, but we all have an impact on here. So you might have heard of low nitrogen systems. Sometimes they're called IA systems, innovative alternative. They're different than conventional tanks. They're specifically designed to remove nitrogen from your wastewater. Suffolk County has approved 7 different systems homeowners can install, each capable of meeting the new standard. These are some of the names that you might have heard of: HydroAction, FujiClean, SeptiStar, Orenco. And then we have our line systems, and we have 2 different designs on our lined NRV systems. So how do you know which system to install? Well, while each system is slightly different, they all work in the same principle. There's a multi-chamber tank. You provide aeration to one chamber to stimulate the natural bacteria, which converts ammonia to nitrates, which is called nitrification. And there's another chamber with no oxygen added that converts the nitrates to nitrogen gas, and that's called denitrification. So you all work on this nitrification, denitrification process. So the design engineer will help you kind of guide which system is kind of suitable for your property. Sometimes some have a little bit smaller footprint, so depending on the amount of room that you have and where things are located, they'll kind of steer you to one or the other. My job is to make sure that the system that's going in is a good system for you that's going to serve its purpose of what we need to do. So Chris mentioned about our NRBs, our nitrogen removing biofilters. These are non-proprietary systems. The nice thing about them is there's no exposed covers on the system other than in your septic tank. There's a pump on the septic tank side of the system, but on the actual nitrogen removing system, there's no air blower or anything that's providing the system. It still works on that same principle of nitrification, denitrification. The way it does is the nitrification layer is just an 18 inches of sand, and below that is a denitrification section, which is sand and wood chips, and that part is submerged to keep the oxygen low. And so it's a very simple system, and as Chris mentioned, it also removes some emerging contaminants, and it also is the best performing of any system that's out there. So we're very excited about this. And here's the chart. I just want to mention that there's a whole lot of systems that were tested that didn't meet the county standard of 19. And they go through this process to get approved, and we just have our systems. This is an old chart, so we have another system, this boxed NRB, which is actually doing the best performance right now on there. So the center's been working on other technologies to reduce nitrogen load further. We understand that the NRB is not for every site. It takes up a larger surface area, so if you're on a tight property, that might be an issue for you. So we've looked at ways of how do we increase the performance of the existing commercial IA systems. So we've installed what is called a wood chip box polishing unit, which is basically just a tank with wood chips in it to remove the excess nitrates. We have 2 wood chip boxes installed in Georgica Pond. On one site, the nitrate levels, there's 2 IA systems going to 1 wood chip box, and the nitrate levels are fairly good, 5 parts per million coming out. That's not total nitrogen, that's just nitrates. But coming through the wood chip box, we're able to get down to 0.02. And another site where the commercial IA system wasn't performing that well is actually above the county standard, for whatever reason that was. But we got the effluent down to 3 parts per million. I think is still running at like 5 parts per million now. So we think the county standard 19, you can get below that. We've proven we can get below it. We currently have a grant with the town of Southampton to install 8 wood chip boxes on commercial systems through a separate grant. So our ultimate goal is to gather more data and encourage Suffolk County to offer an additional incentive for polisher units. The center has worked with Suffolk County and New York State, and we've come up with a guidance document for how to design these NRBs, these wood chip boxes on so they can get installed. So how are we doing in Sagg Pond? Well, here's a map showing the watershed and the IAs. The items in the dots in blue are the ones that are actually installed and in the ground. Those include ones that were not just upgrades, but those were new construction too, and also homeowners that volunteered. The items in red here are the homeowners that I'm continually working with, and I've been in discussions with them, trying to get them to commit to the upgrade. Sometimes it takes a while for people to fully commit on the system. So I educate them, I follow back with them, try to see if there's any other obstacles that I can help them with to get them to go move forward. So we have 11 homes that we're working with. Here's another map. Thanks, Matt, for helping do the overlay here. This is just the same kind of data, but it's just with the overlay of showing the groundwater travel times. So ideally, we want more system upgrades in the darker shades, which are the 0 to 2 year travel time, groundwater travel time. But all the upgrades eventually that water is going to end up going to the pond. It's just how quickly that it's going to do that. So we still need more people that are in the 0 to 2 year groundwater travel time, but we'll just keep plugging away at it. There are a number of incentives from Suffolk County, New York State, and the town of Southampton. It's very exciting that Suffolk County just increased their base grant from 10,000 to 15,000. They still have the 5,000 for the low to moderate income, and 10,000 from the state and 20,000 from the town of Southampton. So with most homeowners that are in the Sagg Pond watershed are eligible for a total of 45,000 in incentives. So what are the basic steps for your upgrade? Well, the first thing I always encourage people to do is submit grant applications for Suffolk County and the town of Southampton. And I have to stress that just submitting the application does not commit you to moving forward with the upgrade. But it takes a while for them to get approved and go through the process. So I say take the first step. You don't have to make the decision right now. If you're still on the fence, submit the application anyway. And then you would contract with a design professional to prepare plans for your property. The system size is based on the number of bedrooms, and the engineer might ask you questions about your future use of your property, and are you planning on doing any additions to your house that might encourage you to upsize your system now, so it would be suitable for that expansion. Suffolk County has a list of installers on their approved list. You have to use one of their installers if you're going with the county grant. If you're just moving forward with the state grant and the town grant, you can use another approved installer. It doesn't have to be one from the county list. There's permits that you need. Sometimes it's a simple septic registry. That's usually done through the installers. The county will inspect and visit your site during the installation, and then they'll witness the startup. The county grant pays directly to the installer. The town grant is a reimbursement program. So you would submit copies after the job is done with your expenses for reimbursement under the grant program. The state program is run by the county and Suffolk County. The Department of Health Services run that program for the state. So there's no separate state application. There's just one application with the county, and they count that as the state application. When they review their grant, they'll review it for the state grant as well. So here's some pictures that I have of installs. So what can you expect from an install? Well, they need to excavate your property. So you can see it's pretty much disturbed. There's going to be a piece of big excavator on your property and piles of dirt. It's kind of important to work with your engineer when they're designing your system and looking at, where the equipment's gonna, where's good place to access the property, what kind of hardscape's in the way, landscaping's in the way. You can throw a design on a piece of paper, but there might be a prized tree, that the property owner wants to save, and maybe the system can be moved over to just a slightly different location to not affect that. So it's important to kind of have some feedback with them, and I can help with that. The install actually is fairly straightforward. It takes as little as 1 to 2 days. Usually it's one full day, and then they're polishing things up on the second day. So there's disruption to your property, but it's temporary. But the benefits that you're going to get to the water quality are long lasting. There will be some visual impacts to the IA. There's access covers that need to be, you need access to them to service the units. They come out and service the units twice a year. Here's an example of some covers. The Fuji Cleans and Hydro Actions are very similar with, there's 3 green plastic covers. And the Orenco is a little different style. There's a plastic a hatch that opens up, that folds open on there. There's control panels associated with it. I mentioned that you have provide air to these systems, so you have an air blower, but they can usually be remotely located. Sometimes they put it on the panel on a post. This homeowner didn't want to have a post in the yard. They said, "Hey, can you attach it to the side of my house here?" And we were able to tuck. This is a blower that provides the air, and we were able to tuck that behind a bush, and you can actually plant another bush in front of it if you want here to do it. Here's a high interaction, it has a little different control panel. Here's the little tiny blower in there, and here's some controls. And here's the lid that's just off right on this one. This is an Orenco control panel that was installed on the side of someone's garage. So that can be a distance away from it. Some homeowners have done some creative screening with plantings to kind of hide the covers. So here's some nice landscaping done on this one. Here's some bushes on here. I've seen people have cutouts of astroturf that they put on it. Here's one that they just incorporated. This is a hydro action, the actual control panel, not remotely located. It's actually attached on the tank and the other covers, the other two covers, and they just blended it in with the landscaping. This was a hedge that behind here was that big Orenco lid, if you want to call it. So that was just hidden behind the thing. So each property is different, and you can get creative. I actually seen somebody install. They took whiskey barrels and cut them as planters, and they put them on top of the tanks. You can also purchase, they have those, I don't know if you've seen those artificial rocks that sometimes hide your sprinklers or backflow preventers or things like that in your garden. You can put that on it. So there's different ways of it. It just needs to be accessible so the installer can come when they do the servicing. So after your install, Suffolk County will witness the startup. You'll submit all your required documents to the town of Southampton for your rebate. Now, in your install cost, Suffolk County requires a 3-year service agreement with the initial installation, so that'll be in your installation price. After that, the homeowner is required to secure a service agreement each year after that. It can be either with the initial service provider or with another service provider. So the assistance I provide to homeowners is at no charge. I educate you on the septic upgrade program and what to expect. I can help you with the grant applications. There are a number of documents that you need to gather, your deed, your CO, and for some homeowners that didn't have those documents available, I was able to help track it down with the towns and get them copies. I can help you select an engineer for designing your system. We can solicit bids for the installation if you don't have an installer that or a service provider that you use. And then I work with trying to make sure that your system is the best system that you can put in your ground there. So here's my email that you can contact me at and my phone number. I can meet with you in person, Zoom. Don't be afraid to ask a lot of questions. And if you have more questions, ask more questions. That's what I'm here for. It's a process. I tell people it's not a race, but there are steps that you need to take. And that first step is get the application submitted. You're not committing to anything by doing that. And it'll be the first step to take. And I'll be happy to help with you any way I can get this thing going. And stop sharing. We can jump to questions.
Thank you so much, Tom and Chris. That was fascinating. So I'm gonna kick us off with a question about the the impact that updating septic systems can have on getting us to that goal of 63% reduction in nitrogen. Um, maybe it's hard to quantify without doing some very quick mental math, but how close will this get us? I guess.
Well, I mean, it looks like about a quarter of the total nitrogen load is coming from septic. So addressing that gets us, more than about halfway there. The other thing I'll say about that estimate of the 63% reduction, that's partly dependent on how frequently the pond is opened. And so if the trustees do move to a regime of more frequent openings, the level of nitrogen reduction that'll be needed will be lower.
And if anyone does have questions that they didn't pop in the chat, feel free to either unmute yourself, raise your hand. I can call on folks. Oh, Mark.
Yeah. Hi, Chris. I just want to ask the contrast between the Mecox and Sagg on being an oyster habitat. My sense is that Mecox is also very stressed for the same reasons and by the same forces we're talking here tonight at Sagg.
Yeah.
But you're saying that Mecox is so much more productive, and I wonder why is one so productive even though they're afflicted with the same challenges as the other? I'm just curious why is Mecox so good and Sagg so.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, there's not a lot of research that's been out there to really dig into to understand that. My guess is that as a bigger system, Mecox has more gradients and is less impacted when the cut is open. It's a more gradual change in salinity.
Right.
And and it's an established fishery there. So I think, what we're looking at is that if the condition, I don't know why there's not more oysters in Sagg Pond right now. But our goal really is to understand, can they survive and thrive? And if they can, maybe that's motivation to work on oyster restoration, knowing how well they do there. But as far as, the reasons that you don't, to my knowledge, that there's not a robust fishery for oysters there up in Sagg Pond, it's a good question. And it may also be, the salinity is very important. I think, I want to say the salinity is pretty similar between the two systems, but again, Mecox, because it's slightly larger, may have more areas of lower salinity, and that's one of the reasons I'll just emphasize here. If you go you go all across Long Island, whether it's the North Shore, the South Shore, go up, fairly far
Right.
up the Hudson River, the salinity is very high in all the estuaries. Oysters like lower salinity. They grow better and they're more resistant to predators and to disease. And that's what you find in Sagg Pond. And so that's why we're bullish on oysters.
Thank you.
I do see that we have Ann Welker with us, who's our county legislator. Ann, I don't know if you want to, and former town trustee. And I don't know if you want to say anything or speak to, your work in this area.
Hi, everybody. I'm driving, so, and I jumped on late. So unfortunately, I missed pretty much all of Dr. Gobler's presentation. So I will watch the recording for sure. I think my question would be, it's so great to see within the watershed that I believe there are 22 or 23 properties that have upgraded their systems. There are 11 more that are considering upgrading their IA systems. How do we incentivize others to upgrade? How do we make the upgrading more attractive to homeowners? I think that's something that, especially given that we all voted on Proposition 2 on the ballot in November, and said that this proposition went through to extend funding for our IA systems as well as wastewater treatment plants where appropriate. But so we have funding. So how do we transfer the gosh, sorry, it caught me off guard, John. I've had a long day. So,
Sorry.
I guess
No,
it's
that's great.
basically how do we catch people that we're willing to approve at the 70% approval for Prop 2? How do we get them to now take action to upgrade their systems? And that's not, I'm not asking for an answer, but it's more just a reflective question. But I would be happy to listen to anybody that might have thoughts on that.
Well, I can chime in and provide some thoughts on that. Some of the homeowners, they're seasonal properties. And I find that they're not even thinking about their properties when they're not at the properties. So there's a very small window that they're actually thinking about the properties, and when they're at the properties, they're not thinking about their septic systems. So, part of it is the education that we keep doing, and keep on it out there. But it's people don't think about it when they're especially the seasonal homeowners aren't thinking about their properties when they're not out there. It's when they're out there, and then I think they have other, their minds other ways. So I think, we, need to try some different things, but, I think that's an issue that we have.
Tom, you also said something before this meeting that I think resonated with me, at least, of the kind of community advocacy having a real impact. Hearing from whether it's neighbors or people who are, really part of a homeowners association, but who've gone through the process and can really testify to what it entailed and how successful it was. That has been really successful and something that we can do more of.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways of getting it, and word of mouth. I know Mark's on the call here. I know Mark, he's funneled several people to me and said, you should talk to Tom about upgrades. So I'm looking at one particular farm. This one isn't in Sagg Pond, but it's in the Mecox Bay area, and it's a farm, and he's got 4 different structures on that, and I'm trying to see, other grants that are available, are they available on each of the multiple structures on there? And it's not an easy answer, so I'm trying to dig through those things, but I've gotten a lot of homeowners interested from, after they've talked with somebody about, hey, upgrades. So I think where we can, and whatever forum we have, just talking about the upgrades and funneling people to me, and then I'll take it from there.
Just, again, a little more hope, at least for in recent conversations from Department of Health personnel and county executive personnel as well. They are going after simplifying that application. The words that were used were that it's as easy as ordering on Amazon.
I think I have heard that, but they're trying to make it as easy as ordering an Amazon package. Was that it? I think you're breaking up a little bit, Anne. I'm sorry.
Did you hear any of that?
uh, not much.
I think
Is
what
it better?
I
Is
think
it
what you
better
might
now?
Yes, much better now.
Okay. Okay, hold on. I can pull over. All I want to say was talking with Suffolk County Department of Health and the county executive's office, they are going out of that speak to the CPF portion, but what was said to me was we want this application to be as easy as ordering on Amazon. So that's
A ways to go.
A great goal.
yeah. Well, the discussions that I've had with the county, they've been working on their systems to streamline the process. Um, I'm hoping that the grant process, which, yes, it's great they increased the grant program funding, but um, getting to those applicants has been slow um, on there. So I'm hoping that gets, they can speed that up, which I believe they will. But they all are doing something a little bit different with their um, approval process of the systems. So that is a little bit more streamlined already. And I'm just starting to go through it to kind of see how that impacts properties. But I don't think every property, but it will allow a very simple, you can work with your installer, come out a sketch of what is going to be installed, and then they'll as long as it's approved by an engineer, it'll go quickly, on the approval process. So I know they've been thinking about it. So I think maybe, and that's some of the things that it's good to hear that the elected officials and the county have been uh, um, it's been top of mind, and they want to move that forward. So that's I believe that's going to happen.
I have a question. The the bodies of water in Sag Harbor, the inlets and bays, have they become more nitrogen polluted than they than they have a few years back?
Yeah, you're saying Sag Harbor and like Sag Harbor Cove and such.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I've been studying that area for the past I don't know how many years. I'll go with 8. And
Hmm.
they certainly have water quality issues, particularly in the back in Sag Harbor Cove. That area is not flushed very well. I mean, there's
Hmm.
tons of homes there, so they have issues with harmful algal blooms, different types than you see in Sagg Pond marine species,
Hmm.
and low oxygen conditions. Um, and they're as far as the nitrogen sources there, it's more like 80% from nitrogen from septics, because there's almost no farming. So yeah,
Hmm.
there's certainly it's a different scenario because you've got different things happening in the marine water
Hmm.
body, but there's
Hmm.
certainly also dealing with water quality issues.
And how about Northwest Harbor?
Northwest Harbor is I also doing work with the trustees since 2014 in Northwest Harbor, and
Right.
is generally in better shape. It's a more pristine system as far as there's surrounding developments a little bit lower
Hmm.
within the watershed. Um, but an interesting thing I'm going to present to the East Hampton Town trustees on this coming Monday at 6:30 p.m. For my annual report, and in that I'm going to show a 10-year synopsis. And what's interesting is that over the decades, for almost all the systems, you do see this sort of monotonic rise in the levels of total algae in the water.
Hmm.
And so, just sort to me is a little bit of evidence that like East Hampton was probably the wave of increasing human population probably hit East Hampton last, but even the more pristine water bodies are seeing rises in total algae.
Hmm. Very good.
I have a quick
I did,
question for Chris, if that's okay.
Sure, hi Molly.
Um, Hi. Thanks for the great presentation, Tom and Chris. I have a comment and also a question. So I wanted to bring it back to what you said about how the north part of the pond, the water quality was poorer than like the southern part of Sagg Pond, and just the work that we've been doing, we verifies like what you guys have found as well. I think the what we found in the northern part of the pond is that there's a lot more groundwater coming in, nitrogen rich groundwater. So I think like we're finding similar results in that respect, that the water quality is poorer in the northern part of the pond. And my question is, with the cyanobacteria, they are freshwater cyanobacteria, right? So I was curious as to where are you sampling in the pond for the cyanobacteria? And would you expect there to be differences in the north versus the south with respect to the concentrations of cyanobacteria?
Yeah, good question. I mean, and so the answer is we typically we sample both at the bridge, which is sort of the dividing line almost of the north and south, but also we have a sampling site in the south. And there can be stark differences if the pond is open, right? When the pond is closed, those two sites are not all that different. But if you get an opening and a strong opening, yeah, this year in particular, we saw some really, really big differences where the salinity, for example, was getting up to, say, above 25 for our southern location. But up by the bridge, even though that tide was coming in from the ocean, the salinity was still only like around, I think it got up to like 6, it was less than 10. So it holds on to that area is not getting flushed out. There does seem to be some sort of restriction in the tide reaching very far to the north. Um, yeah,
All right, thank you.
yeah, you're welcome.
That's great. I see another question in the chat here from Tom White. I'm curious about I'm curious about how having the pond at flood stage often or rarely might affect the water pollution and bacteria problem patterns that you're seeing.
Yeah, well, if by flood stage, assuming Tom that you mean,
I'm guessing at higher water levels.
yeah, yeah. So at higher water levels, that's when the pond has not been open for a while. And so when that happens, yeah, the pond gets a lot fresher, and you're not flushing in that clean ocean water, and so you have the buildup of everything you really don't want: the nutrients, the bacteria, the cyanobacteria, the cyanotoxins, the nitrogen, the phosphorus. Um, so yeah, there is definitely, particularly in the southern end of the pond, there's a direct relation as far as getting flushed out. You see it in the sediments also. I'll just mention as a side that when we surveyed the sediments, you could just see the sediments are all very sandy in the southern extent, and so that just gives you the sense that any fine-grained sediments are being brought in and out on the tide. But as soon as you get into the neck, they're all muddy, and that just tells you that they're not being flushed out very well.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. Um, if there are any other questions, please ask them now, but also reach out to us personally. We'll share a follow-up email with the recording from this presentation and Tom's contact information for sure, but you can always reach any of us here at the Peconic Land Trust as well. We love to talk more. And I do want to reiterate what John said earlier. This is a huge project, and it's not just a local issue. As Chris was saying, John, this is a project, an issue that affects coastal ponds across eastern Long Island and globally, honestly. But we have an opportunity here to make a real impact locally. So thank you for everyone who's already helped make this project possible. Um, like John said, we're going to try to raise $150,000 by June to unlock this really generous grant from the Goldman Foundation, and we hope you'll help us achieve that. Thank you again, everybody.